Welcome back. Check the Pulse podcast. Guys, I was off for like 2 weeks, but we're back. We're better. Crazy guest list this month. I think I have like 5 guests coming up. So you know what to do. Like, subscribe, do your thing. And if you want to be on the pod, feel free to reach out to me. But today, as usual, I'm grateful and honored to have a close friend of mine on the pod, Angela Lopez. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to everybody for those that may not know you? A little bit about your entrepreneurship journey, where you are today, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Absolutely. So, like Kristina said, I'm Angela Lopez, and I am a wellness practitioner, life coach. But I also work with corporations to bring up their workplace culture, bring wellness into the workplace, and kind of shift people's leadership mindsets so that they are more compassionate and more driven to create a productive space that also allows people to be the best versions of themselves. So that's some of the work I do, and how I got there was really through, I worked in corporations where burnout was high, where workplace culture was toxic, and I thought to myself, this sucks. And so I wanted to change that. But in that process, I hit burnout. Right. And I spiraled. And I went through a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, and I had to do the work myself. So, I went on my own healing journey, my own personal growth journey. And that's what led me to doing certificates in, specialized mindful meditation and life coaching and sound healing, and learning how we can do all these natural things to help our mind, body, and soul. And as you grow and as you learn and as you become more self-aware, you realize about all of these like outside noises and energies that impact your everyday life. And so through that, I was like, I really want to help other people who feel like they're alone, who feel like this is just how they have to live, and, have to deal with these things without, a lot of the times when you're going through anxiety and depression, you don't talk to your family, you don't talk to your close friends about it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's easier to talk to an outsider, somebody who's not in your circle. Yep. And so I really wanted to be that person for people. And that's why I got started on, the personal stuff. So the personal life coaching and the holistic practices to help people. But then I knew that it was always a passion of mine to help change the workplace culture. And then that's what got me prompted to start doing things within the corporations.
That's super neat. I agree with that. Like, I'm big on personal wellness and like spirituality and like healing within naturally. So that's amazing that you do that. I think you mentioned a very important point where, people that genuinely have, anxiety or depression, sometimes they feel ashamed to even speak about it, or they're scared to. Mm-hmm. And I think nowadays we live in a culture where, it is an open conversation, and a lot of people do come forward that they do deal with this. So, being a safe space for others to come to you and to get that natural healing, because some people are also scared to go to the doctor and get medication. So I think it's a good reminder to people that, the doctor is not always the only option, and you can do it yourself. I think a lot of people forget that our bodies are meant to naturally heal. You get a cut, it closes by itself. Like, it's meant to heal through its energy, through literally just how you're built as a human. You don't always have to rely on external sources to heal you internally. I'm also a believer in that certain medications just harm you more. It's like a Band-Aid cover, right? So I think that's amazing. Let's backtrack a little bit. So you're in corporate, and then you went on this like personal growth journey, right? To like heal yourself from within. What made you realize like, hey, you know what? I can do this by myself. I don't need to go to a doctor. This is the path I'm going to take for my healing journey to come out of this.
So the reality is I did go to a doctor first.
Okay.
Right. So I went to a doctor, and I was like, I feel like I'm just spiraling and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so naturally the first thing was, medication.
Right.
But then I realized that a lot of it was deeper than just this surface level anxiety and depression. And so that's when I realized I had to start looking within.
Right.
And one of the things you learn is anxiety really comes from fear.
Right. 100%.
Right. So when we're fearful of something, we get anxious. And then the more we don't deal with that fear, the more the anxiety picks up.
Right.
And then you just go down a darker space. So doing the course in meditation, because this course related to everything. So it was personal, it was workplace, it was business. How do you be mindful in the space that you're in, not only about your own feelings and your own needs, but about other people around you. Yeah. And so in doing that work, that's when I realized, okay, a lot of this is on the work that I have to do for myself. Yeah. And so that's when I started reading, you know, and learning more of how to heal my own wounds, how to heal, you know, any past traumas that I was dealing with. And listen, it is a continuous work in progress.
100%, 1,000%. Well, it's because you also, as you grow, you gain new traumas and you go through new experiences. So you're never done. I do think, though, what you can work on is healing those past traumas, right?
Absolutely. So when you heal the past traumas and you grow from there, then everything moving forward is a little easier.
For sure.
Right? And so as human beings, we're meant to continue learning. We're meant to continue growing. Yep. Who you are today, in 2 years from now, you could be somebody completely different, right? Your experiences and the things that you encounter will change how you see things and your perspective on things. But deep down, we're always the same person. It's just how we view life is different.
Yep.
And so I think that that is the important part about self-awareness. And I know that self-awareness can be scary for people. Yeah. But the more self-aware you are, the more likely you are to find joy and peace in your life. Yeah. So it's an important piece of work to do.
And I feel even when you gain that self-awareness, or you not even gain it, you always kind of have it, but actually confront it. That's when you find true happiness, because now you really realize what makes you happy. If you're not self-aware, you may think something makes you happy, but is that making you happy, but not actually you? Like, is it the perception that people have of you? So now this makes me happy because you think I'm a soccer player, maybe going to a soccer game will make me happy. Does it actually though? Yeah. Right? So I think that's a massive point. What would you say was like the scariest moment for you when you realized like, hey, this is deeper than like what medication could help? You know, like you really had to sit with yourself and be like, you know, what am I tapping into? Is it your inner child you realize you had to heal, or like maybe some events you went through in your life? Did you have that moment of fear, or to you it was just like, I know I need to go deeper. I'm going to sit with my thoughts and kind of get this on the go?
Definitely there was the moment of fear, right? It was the moment of fear because you had to be real. Yeah. Right? And you had to really confront feelings that you buried, right? And that you suppressed. And so it's not like it just everything surfaced. And I encourage people to journal. Yeah. Because journaling is where you can really get out how you truly feel. And sometimes if there's one question, answer it 3 times. Ooh, okay. Because your answer may get deeper every time you answer it. True. And then you really get, because you know, it's the surface stuff. Like, okay, this is how I feel, whatever. Right. And you get on with it. And then the next time you ask it, you have already written that surface stuff. So now it's like, okay, I'm going to touch in a little bit deeper. Yeah. And so your answer changes. And you get to that reality point when you ask yourself that more than once and you're truly honest with yourself. Yeah. But there's going to be that fear. And I think that fear is what you typically holds people back. Yeah. From being honest, right, about why they are the way they are. Yep. What created it, because maybe, you know, they're scared to say, you know, when I was a kid, this happened, or I was expected to be this way, and this is why I'm now, you know, the biggest one is people pleasing, right? So a lot of the times as kids, we're taught you have to respect your elders. So, you know, when your elders say, you know, come give me a hug, come give me a kiss, you know, that's what you have to do. You're not doing it because you want to. Like, for some people, they do it out of love and they want to, but for others, they don't, but they have to do it. Right. Right. And so you're pleasing somebody. Yeah. So you grow up learning that that's what you have to do. Yeah. And then, so for some people, that carries on throughout their whole life. Mm-hmm. And then, unfortunately, you know, one day they might wake up and be like, I've lived this life that was never about me. Yeah. And it was all about making other people happy and making sure I was doing what I was expected to do for other people.
Yeah.
And that's a hard realization.
Especially as you get older.
Especially as you get older.
Because now you're obviously at different points in your life, whether you're now in university or you have a partner or you're a mom or a dad, like each time. And I think it's even harder. I'm not there yet, but you could probably attest to this when you have a kid, because now you're like, I need to be their role model. They're looking at me like I have like my shit figured out basically. And I'm like here spiraling like, wait, when I was 6, like I did this, right? Yeah. So even that, I feel maybe a lot of adults will resonate. Like, how do you navigate that? Because obviously you have children as well. So that balance between, you know, teaching them now what you know and what you've learned in this journey, but not letting it like affect you in the sense where it's okay for you to also be healing. You don't have to know everything.
Yeah. So I think it's that balance. And, you know, I've heard this before in movies and things like that, but you've only been a parent as long as your oldest child is, right? So you're as a parent, you're constantly learning as you go through, but the more you become self-aware, the more you have the ability to recognize how you're parenting. Right. And so a big thing for me is acknowledging when I'm wrong and saying I'm sorry. You know, so maybe I had a really bad day. And so the way I react to something is not the best. Right. And so I need to say, you know what, guys, I'm really sorry. Mommy had a really tough day. Yeah. It's not an excuse, but you know what, maybe I shouldn't have reacted that way. And I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. Yeah. And that teaches them a lot. Yeah. Right. And not a lot of kids get that. An apology from a parent. What?
Yeah. Rare.
But it's a strong thing because you're showing them that you're human, that you make mistakes, but that you can own the mistake.
Right.
And I think that's a strong lesson. Yep. Right. And I think it's important for your kids to also realize that there's good days and there's bad days. And it's okay to let those emotions out.
For sure.
You know, it's okay to cry. It's okay to not have everything in the ideal way that you think it should be. Yeah. Because that's how we also get to that point of perfectionism when, you know, we teach kids that, oh, it has to be, you know, you have to get A's all the time. That's a lot of pressure. Yeah. So yeah, parenting is a learning curve. Absolutely. Yeah. But the more we are aware of ourselves and the more we heal ourselves, the better we are able to teach our kids from our own experiences and the way we're able to change the way we parent.
For sure.
Yeah. Right? Because I think a lot of us start off parenting the way we were parented.
1,000%. 1,000%.
And you see that growth, right? Yeah. As you do the work, you see that growth and you see how you change and you see how your mindset changes to certain things. And so, you know, one of the things for me that was really important with my kids is obviously to teach them manners, but to ensure that they didn't feel like they needed to please everybody.
That's massive.
And so that was a big thing for me.
I think that's very important because majority of people, I was the same. Like I grew up, my parents were old school at the time. Like, so my brother and I have a 9-year age gap. So obviously in 9 years, a lot can change in like society and even just with my parents and life. So when they raised me, they were really young. So they were, like you said, the way they were raised, I was raised. So, you know, you sit at the table, you don't talk. You're the kid unless they speak to you, you know, this, that, all these rules. Yeah. So as a kid, you feel silence. As a kid, you become a people pleaser. And in turn, I've probably still am to a certain point, but I've done my work, like as a people pleaser majority of my life because I don't want anyone to get mad at me. I don't want to hear the yelling. I don't want to make you mad. Like, okay, like if you want to do that, let's do it. Yeah. And it was through a lot of friendships that I've realized, and you know, they were self-aware and they were like, hey, like stop people pleasing, like you have a voice too, validating my feelings. And you saying, you know, as an adult you should apologize, I think that's important because now you're validating your child's feelings. Growing up, my parents yelled at me. I knew they were wrong, but God forbid I tried to say anything. Oh yeah, I was wrong. I was always wrong. I was the kid. Where it's like with my brother now, they've seen that change, and obviously I've had conversations with them about it. So with him, like he can vocalize his opinion more. Like even in school, you know, I still respect the teacher, of course. But to me, even if the teacher was wrong, if I tried to tell my parents that, no, I was wrong. I was the kid. But with him, like they'll listen to him more. And you can see the difference, right? He stands up for himself. And I think that's a massive point that you mentioned, because I think it's overlooked and so many children are impacted by it. But that all ties back to having self-awareness as an adult, right? So even just to touch on the journaling, because a lot of people say it's important, you know? So I have two questions for you. The first one is, when I think now as adults, we say we can journal, but like, do your kids journal? Like, do you think people should start journaling at a younger age and start learning that habit? And then the second one is, what questions should people roughly answer when they're journaling?
Yeah, so the first one is, I think that the earlier you can teach journaling to kids, the better, because then that's a natural habit to them as they grow up, right? Yeah. And so then they naturally are able to express their emotions more or communicate better. Right. It's hard because they go to school all day, and, you know, unless they enjoy writing, it can seem like a daunting task, but it doesn't have to be difficult for them. Like, it could be like, you know, answer one question a day type of thing. And then, you know, what kinds of questions should you be answering? Sometimes it's just a matter of saying, what was my day like today? Like, what were the highs? What were the lows? Yep. And, you know, why were the lows the lows? Okay. And that can lead to profound questions. But as you become more aware and you tap into the things that you want to work on, the internet is glorious. Yes. You know, you can literally type in, you know, acknowledge my fear of bull, give me journal prompts. Yeah. And you'll get questions that you can answer. Wow. Right. Okay. And so I think tapping into what your fears are, or tapping into like the things that you feel that are a constant struggle for you, and really journaling about those things can definitely lead to some of the most profound discoveries about yourself. For sure. And I think it's easy, like in the sense where it's free. You could do it by yourself. You don't have to go to someone. I think some people think that to start this journey, to have this self-awareness, some people have so much anxiety, like, I can't meditate. There's just too many thoughts. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, there's guided meditations on YouTube. That's how I started, because I couldn't just meditate. Yeah. I listened to someone for like a year, and then you start to learn, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you control your thoughts. It's definitely daunting, but, you know, meditation, journaling, these are things that are free, and there's tools now that I think we're so privileged to have that you could, you know, really leverage to help you get on this journey. And then if you really can't, look to people like yourself that can guide you and really bring you to these new self-realizations that you may not have been able to get to. Because I think even with journaling, people will do it, but if they're really that scared to hit that deep root, they'll stop themselves and be like, okay, I'm done for today. Or they feel it coming up, like, and they're going to write it, and then they don't. Because the moment you write it, it's real. And it's like, 100%. Wow, you know? So I've had people literally, like, in sessions break down crying before they even get to write something on paper. Because they know. And, or they start writing, and it's just the waterworks, right? Because like you said, that you put it on paper, and now it might not have spoken it vocally, but I've put what my reality is down on paper. It no longer just sits in my head. Yeah. And for some people that's difficult. For sure. But like you said, you know, there's so many resources, there's so many tools, and don't put so much pressure on yourself. If you can only answer one simple question in a journaling prompt, like, how was my day? Yeah. Then start there. Yeah. Meditation, if you can only do 1 minute, start there. Yeah. Like, I think when people think of meditation, they think of like this daunting, like, oh my God, I have to sit there for 10 minutes. I have to clear my mind. And it is the most difficult thing to do. Yeah. So start small. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. If you can even honestly only do 20 seconds where your mind is clear and then a thought pops in, acknowledge the thought. Yeah. It's there for a reason. And then release it and come back. Yeah. You know, something as simple as sitting outside and just taking some deep breaths. That's you being in the present moment. That's you being mindful. Yeah. Start small. Don't put so much pressure on yourself, but understand the importance of taking care of yourself. Yeah, for sure. And I think like there's this documentary on Netflix that I didn't watch it, but I watched the preview, and it was on grounding. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people
you know, growing up, like, even me and my friends, like, oh, you're a tree hugger. You hug trees. Like, damn right. I hug trees now. We go on a walk in, like, the ravine. You see me, my mom, my dad, we're all, like, hugging a tree. But it's because we've been influenced now, and, like, my circle and the people we're around with have we all believe in the same things. So they've shown me the importance of that and how that can change your life. And in this documentary, they explain that someone that went outside to ground every single day, I forgot the amount of days it was for. Grounding, for those that don't know, it's you basically just like reconnecting yourself with the earth. So it's like go outside on your grass barefoot and just stand there and just breathe. And something so simple that is overlooked was literally healing like cancer and Alzheimer's and all these big diseases. And it's so undervalued, the energy in our bodies and how we are connected to Mother Nature. You know, like I said, people make fun of it because it's like, oh, you're a tree hugger. But at the same time, it's like, okay, but I can look at you and say, when you're sick, you go pop 35 Advils. Whatever works for you at the end of the day, but this is what I find heals me the best. You know, and I think going on that natural journey, and it's great that you provide this service to others, is you awaken that within them. And some people don't realize they have it. They could hear it. You know, nowadays it's getting even bigger and louder on social media and the internet. But until they find someone they can connect with and resonate with, they won't really take that step to get into that journey, right? So let's dive into a little bit like what you do now. So I know you said you started more personal and then the corporate because you're in corporate life. So on a personal level, like if I came to you and said, listen, I have high anxiety, like I want to heal it, I want to go down this journey. What does that look like?
So I would give you options, right? Okay. So we could do some coaching sessions, but I do things that work with your energies, right? So I do Indian head massages, which will alleviate anxiety and stress. And if you have tension, headaches, or migraines that you suffer from, which typically come from stress. So there's, you know, holistic treatments like that. There's the sound healing that I do. There's lymphatic drainage that I do, which is, you know, all working on your body, but also at the same time, because I take a holistic approach, I also work on, you know, your mind and your soul while we're doing those sessions.
Gotcha.
And then the life coaching, we dive deeper. Right. And so there's different packages that I have depending on what you're looking at. Okay. And, you know, we have either in-person or virtual sessions, but part of your package is also that I send you journaling prompts. I send you meditations, and they're all designed specifically for what your goals are.
Okay. So it's custom.
It's custom. Because there's no point in a cookie cutter approach.
100%.
Because everybody's looking to achieve something different. And those journal prompts, you know, your responses to those are utilized in our coaching sessions as well. So it's a very hands-on approach. And if, you know, in between our sessions, if you're, you know, you feel like there's something on your mind and you need to just get it out there, you know, I have an open dialogue with all of my clients. You can send me an email and I will respond to you. Because I think that that's one of the hardest things, when you kind of feel like there's something you need to get off your chest, but you don't know who to turn to. You don't know where to go. And so when people work with me, I always say, like, I'm that person. So shoot me an email or a text and I'll get back to you. And then this way it's a sense of relief, right? There's so much weight on holding everything in and suppressing everything. And that's my biggest thing, is I want to give people that outlet, because it makes a world of a difference. And that's why community and connection is so important. That's why grounding is so important, right? And it's things that we take for granted.
100%. And they're literally like just outside our doorstep. But I think even just to touch on, like, when people have like those deep thoughts, or like they are holding things within, they're, like I was saying before, like scared to tell other people, maybe ashamed to tell other people. But there's also that if you're a people pleaser, then it's like, well, I don't want to put my burdens on you. I feel bad. And I still do this with my friends sometimes. They'll be like, what's wrong? I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, I'll just figure it out myself. But it's like building inside me, building this tension. And they're like, but you can tell me. And I'm like, well, what's the point? Like, I don't want to ruin your day. But it's also realizing that if the people around you care about you and genuinely love you and want the best for you, they will hear you out and they will try to help you. They won't judge you. And if someone is judging you because you're going through this stuff, they're not real, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, this is not a stat, it's me assuming, but everybody's suffered from some sort of anxiety or depression. It's been happening for years. It was just never diagnosed, right? So you're never alone. And that's why I think even Bell Let's Talk is so important, because and no matter where you are in life, you will deal with pressures and stresses. Nobody has a perfect life. No. And that's why you're not alone in it, because the person you're talking to may also be suffering from it. So you triggering that conversation now may make them feel comfortable enough to be like, you know what, like I just went through that, or I went through something similar. There you go. Now you guys are in a discussion. You both don't feel alone. And you providing that extra service outside of, just life coaching, but being there for people, I think is such a value added. Because sometimes you go to, whether it's like, even if it's a therapist or someone you speak to, you trust them and you're going to them for this advice and this guidance. But once that session's over, you don't talk to them till the next session. And it's like, what if I go through something in 2 days and our session's not for 2 weeks? And I don't know how to control it, or I'm not at that point yet, right? Yeah. So I think that's super important and amazing that you do that, like, for your clients.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a crucial part, because like you said, like something can happen and you're like, I have to wait 2 weeks before I can actually talk about this, before I can actually get help on how to manage what I'm going through. Yeah. And that's huge for some people, right? Depending on where they're at in their process. Yeah. So I think it's so important to know that you have somebody there that you can turn to, because a lot of people do go through situations where they feel like, if I tell somebody, I'm going to feel like I disappointed them, or I let them down, or I'm supposed to be the perfect child, or whatever the case may be, right? And that's a lot to live with. Yep. And so until people are able to come to a realization where, you know what, this is who I am, I love who I am, I'm doing the best that I can, I'm a good person, and the outside perspectives of me don't matter, that you need people. Yep. Right? You need a support system. And it's huge. Yep. And you're saying support system, people, community, like you can't go through life alone. And, there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs that will say, at some point, usually in like the high school years or 20s, their friends are going out, they were home and grinding, and no one regrets it, but they all say the same thing. You experience loneliness. And it's like, okay, but you're one. So now if there's 10 other people that are going through that, now you build a community. It's kind of like the wealth club that we're in. Absolutely. It's all like-minded individuals. Like I joined on a risk of like, I don't know what this is going to be. And now I feel heard, and like people are posting their problems, and I'm like, I dealt with that in my business. So even if it's not those around you and you feel like maybe they don't understand you, I promise like there's a community and a tribe out there that is for you. You just got to look for it and believe in yourself enough that you belong. Because sometimes people feel that they have these inner feelings. Maybe it is inner child wound. Maybe they got bullied growing up or whatever it is, that they don't belong. Mm-hmm. And then they get stuck in this like lonely corner, when it's like, you look at Wealth Club. We're basically all dealing with similar problems, but we're all from different industries, different ages, different parts of the world. And we just come together, and it's an online community, by the way. Yeah. We do in-person events, but even just through online, it creates that sense of community. And I think you're kind of doing that as well now, even with your retreats and like bringing people together that are on this journey of self-discovery, self-awareness, and healing. I think it's underrated going on retreats personally, because when you do go, like it's that fear that stops people, because it's like, well, I don't know these people. I'm going to cry in front of them. Oh, I'm not going to open up, whatever. But when you're there and you have a good facilitator and it's set up properly, like you will naturally just let go, because the guy beside you is bawling his eyes out. Mm-hmm. So now you're like, I'm not scared anymore, So let's speak a little bit about like your retreats, because I know they do impact people heavily. And like, what would you say if someone's scared to come? What would you tell them? If you're scared to come to a retreat, honestly, you are going to experience something that you've never experienced before. So one, the immediate thing is, wow, I'm not alone. Like, we're all going through something, and it could be completely different things, but to know that there are a group of people out there who want to become more self-aware, or want to heal, or want to do better, or just literally are like, I deserve some time to self-love, to self-care. It has a huge impact, right? And coming together, some people at first might hold back and not really open up, but through the time that you're together, you start to build these connections. And the reality is that nobody leaves the retreat not staying connected afterwards.
100%.
So you might have felt like you came in alone,
but you left with a community of people.
Yep.
And I think that things happen at retreats that you would never experience otherwise, because it's like 3 days of being together, of constantly doing things that are just for you.
Yeah.
And when else do you get that, right? Where you've just dedicated 3 solid days to caring about yourself, to loving yourself, to exploring new things.
Yeah.
You don't really get that opportunity unless you take that time and you go on a retreat. Or, you know, if it's not a retreat that you want to go on, if you can at least find 2 full days where you walk out of your normal everyday home, you're not going to work, you're not doing any of your other responsibilities, but you are literally just going somewhere where you feel good about yourself, you need it. Mm-hmm. You absolutely need it. Yeah. And until you do it, you won't know the profound impact that it has. And, you know, and I know it's hard for a lot of people sometimes to like go away. Yeah. And so that's why I've tried to focus my retreats on like somewhere in Ontario, but places that are secluded. So you're not hearing like traffic and you're not hearing all of these noises, and you're outside with nature and you're able to ground, and you're able to focus your mind, because it's so important.
Yeah.
And removing yourself from like the city, I think personally is crucial when you're trying to do something for yourself and to disconnect from the everyday life.
For sure. And I think even because you're saying, you know, you do them local, but not so local that it's in the city. Mm-hmm. Some people struggle to sit with themselves in silence, and that's why they struggle with meditation.
Yes.
Like I'll drive now sometimes in my car and I won't even have my music on. I'm just sitting with my thoughts, but I'll have friends come in the car and they'll be like, where's the music? And I'm like, what's the problem? But I used to be like that. So I think, you know, being secluded, being in nature is important, because if there is anybody that's like that, that's coming to the retreat, by the end of it, they'll learn how to be in silence. Go stand outside in the dead of winter in a forest. You'll hear your breath. Mm-hmm. Like it's the trippiest thing, but it's also the most in tune thing you'll do, because you're like, like the air, the trees, my breath. It's like breath work.
Yep.
Vince, great breath work facilitator, said that to me the first time I've ever did a breath work session with him. He's like, do you ever think about the fact that you're breathing? Like, no. He goes, how grateful are you for your breath? I'm like, to be honest, I didn't think about that till this moment.
Yep.
But it's true. You know, we take so much for granted. So being at a retreat, being away, being in nature allows you to express such gratitude for the situation and the environment that you're in. And I think, like, you know, it's kudos to you for doing that, because some people will try to host a retreat like that, but still congested in the city because they care more about location and everyone being able to get there, which is great. But I do not think it will be the same impact as having it somewhere far out, you know? And then on the corporate side, do you do retreats as well for like companies? Like, would that be an option if there's anyone watching, let's say, that has a company is like, you know, I want to offer it to my employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So on my website, it shows that, you know, I will plan a day retreat for you if that's what you want. If you want like a weekend retreat, if you want to create a retreat within, you know, your business location, that's fine. Yeah. Obviously, ideally it'd be to get out, but so I will work with the client and I'll develop a retreat based on what they're looking for. And, you know, the retreat can incorporate wellness and business.
Okay.
But it's to really show my purpose behind retreats for corporations is for them to show their employees, like, your well-being matters.
Yep.
And so when a business wants to provide a retreat to their staff, I think that should be their main objective. Yep. Because, you know, you're going into work and you're only going to be productive as your body allows you to be. And so if you're not well in any kind of capacity, you're only going to deliver so much, right? But if you're in a place of like happiness and you're in a place where you come into work and you feel good about yourself, that productivity jumps, right? And so I think that's important for businesses to be aware of as well, is just your employees' well-being will change the outcome of your business.
For sure. And I think even just as an employee, seeing that, you know, if it's your manager, your boss, or the owner, depending how big the company is, actually cares about your well-being, just that small action, 100%. Let alone, like, that's even before the retreat, just the retreat, sorry, just the fact that they're offering it to you is like, okay, I am cared about. I'm not just a number. I'm not just a worker. And that happens so much in corporate structure where it's like, just get it done, you know, hit the goals, hit the targets, you know, get the report done, work extra hours if you have to. Okay, are you concerned about my strain and my stress, and I got to go home to a family if I have one, or my own personal problems too? So I think it's amazing that you do offer that, because corporate wellness is really on the up and coming nowadays with all this talk about mental health. So I think it's super, super important. What would you say is, besides like productivity, would you say there's another big takeaway for corporate like retreats for corporate companies? Like if someone's on the fence about it?
Yes. So whether you're choosing to do a retreat or you're choosing to bring somebody in to do a breathwork session or a sound healing session or a meditation, whatever it may be. I think that the reality is that, like you said, when you start to show your employees that you care about their well-being, it changes the dynamic altogether. One, because part of that is creating a positive work culture, which means you're not tolerating the toxic behaviors. And so when people realize that this is a place of business, but it's also a place of health and wealth, then they start to treat it that way. And they start to realize, okay, maybe I can have an open conversation with my boss about, you know, what some of my needs are. And this is how I'm going to be the most productive. Or this is how I can actually contribute more to this company outside of like my typical job roles and responsibilities. Because sometimes people have other skill sets that, you know, their specific job function doesn't call for, but they see how it's an asset for the business. But they're not going to come and tell you that if they don't feel like they can have an open conversation with you. And or they don't feel respected within the space. What's the point? Right? So I think productivity is huge. Loyalty is huge, right? Because if they feel respected, if they feel like you care, then they're more loyal to stay. One of the, you know, struggles in a lot of corporations is keeping their top talents.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
So people, you know, after 2 years are leaving to go find a better workplace, better work conditions, maybe something that's more hybrid, right? And so you got to ask yourself, is not providing some kind of wellness within our workplace worth losing our top talents, who have so much potential to teach people who are up and coming how to be successful? You got to stop and think sometimes, you know, because yes, it is up and coming, you know, wellness in the corporate world and things like that. But there are a lot of businesses still that, you know, see it as that woohoo and don't want to give it the time of day. But there's so many studies that show that the more you incorporate this into, and when I say incorporate, I don't mean like an HR tick box. Like, okay, you know, we did something.
We asked, do you have any mental illness? Do you want to speak? And most people are going to be like, no.
Exactly, because they're afraid to say anything. So, because some, you know, companies will call in somebody and they're like, okay, we want to do this like around mental health. And they're like, okay, check. So this year we did something on mental health. Perfect. To really incorporate wellness means that you have a plan. Right? You have a strategy for the year on how you're going to show your employees that their mental health and their well-being matter, and that you're going to keep that workplace culture on a high, on a positive note. So the one-offs, they're great, but they're not changing your workplace culture.
No, it's just enough.
Exactly. Right. So I think that's a huge piece too, is having a strategic plan in place to show your employees that wellness in the workplace and healthy workplace culture is a priority, and not just something that, you know, they're trying to keep HR happy with, or if a complaint does come up, HR can say, well, we did that. So I think that's huge too.
And then would you say, like, to have significant impact, like once a month do something, like once every 2 weeks? Like if someone's listening right now, they're like, okay, so if once in a while isn't good enough, what would you suggest as enough to have an impact?
I would say once a month for sure. And the reality is in-person is great, and that's like the best. But let's just say, you know, due to scheduling or whatever the case is, if you did one in person and then the next month you did one virtual activity, at least it still shows that it's part of a strategic plan. It's not just those one-off things that you're throwing in, right? And facilitators have come so far in how we can deliver things virtually.
Very true. Yeah.
And so, you know, even if it's something like, what are some breath work activities you can do at your desk, or stretches you can do at your desk, right? That's something that can be done virtually, and people can actually participate in front of their computer with. So there's ways to incorporate it, but I would definitely say something once a month.
Yeah.
And then your timing can be different, right? So if it's in person, it could be something that's a little bit longer. If it's a virtual thing, it could be something that's shorter.
Yeah.
But you're still showing that initiative to your employees.
Yeah. And that you care beyond the tick box on the HR checklist.
Yeah.
And I think, it's such a personal opinion, but the people that are in charge that say, oh, whatever, like, I don't need to do it, oh, they're fine, they have so much healing to do
100%.
and work that it's like, I feel like when people have so much trauma built up, they shoo away healing so fast and so much, because internally, like we were saying, the fear and being scared of like, well, if I do it for them, then I have to do it, and what's going to come up for me, and I'm the boss and I can't show weakness, and it's the spiral that comes up. The anxiety arises, but it's like, in that now, that's a selfish response, because now you're harming your entire workplace without realizing it, because you think it's not needed, you know? And I honestly think that as technology has advanced, people's stress and anxiety has advanced, because now you're online and you're seeing everybody else's life. It's not like back in the day, I had just my problems, whatever happened in my house and at work. Now it's like, I have my house, and if I have kids and work and relationship, now I'm going online and I'm seeing Bob Dylan from down the street is living in a mansion in a house party, and we work the same job. What am I doing wrong? You know? So I think that definitely adds. And, you know, being in the field that you are, have you realized that maybe as technology has advanced, people are dealing with more of those struggles of like comparison and, you know, where they're at in life, and, you know, being hard on themselves, maybe if it's age, financial security, so on and so forth?
So I think a huge thing is, you know, there's so much benefit to technology and social media, but I think massively people need to understand that everything you see is not necessarily reality. Yeah. And we can create perspectives or images of what we think those people's lives are, right? But we don't really know. Right. And, you know, if you know anybody who is an influencer on social media and you see everything they post, sit back and say, like, is that actually real? Is that actually reality? In the moment? Right? Or when, you know, people will compare and say, oh my God, their house is always so clean. The odds are they cleaned right before they shot that episode. Yeah. And, you know, that's great. Yeah. But it's okay to be messy, and it's okay, you know, things aren't going to look perfect all the time. Yeah. And you don't know what people's struggles are. So my big thing when it comes to technology is, yes, I think that there's a lot more comparison. Yeah. I think there's a lot more anxiety that comes up around certain things, but I think that's when we have to take a step back and be like, but I don't really know that person's life. Yeah. Right. And so sometimes there's people who buying those expensive things or buying certain things makes them happy because they're trying to fill a void. Right. Right. Where you might have less, but you're happier. Yeah. So everybody is different. And that's why I think it's so important to teach about not judging. Yeah. And it's one of the things. So I do some programs at schools too. And one of the biggest things is when I hear the students judging other students, I'm like, yeah, but why? Yeah. What do you get out of making that statement? Mm-hmm. Because let people live. Mm-hmm. Let people do what they do. You know, they have to answer to themselves. Yeah. And so, you know, just embrace the positive things in your life. Yeah. And don't worry about, you know, what other people are doing or what you think they're doing. Yeah. Or even what they tell you they're doing.
Yes, that's true too.
You know, the reality is that sometimes people feel the need to say those things because of the same things. Fear of being disappointed or disappointing others or feeling like they're not deserving, whatever the case may be, right? There's reasons why people behave and act the way they do. And oftentimes we don't ever know what it is unless we get deep with them. Yeah. And so I always just say, you know, let people be. Yeah. And, you know, just focus on yourself and focus on what makes you happy, because I think one of the most underrated things is peace. Yes. Is your peace, and your peace is going to come from your happiness and your joy. And so that's where your focus needs to be.
For sure. And I think even just touching on peace at the end, people that become self-awareness and go through that healing journey, they not recognize or realize, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, I'm blanking. But they hit a point, they do realize that stillness is real. And when you experience stillness for the first time, you will be so mind-boggled and blown that you can actually achieve that level of peace. I think people think it's so out of reach, and that, you know, like the monks in the mountains can reach it, but they can't. And it's like, I promise you, you can. In your own space, you can. It takes work. But when you get there, you actually don't want to come out of it. So you'll try to do everything you can to conserve it and always be in that state of mind. And it's hard, and we're human, and we all mess up. And like you said, we all keep learning, and that's normal. And I think that's also important to validate and acknowledge, is that you're never going to have it, you know, all put together. But when you experience that for the first time, you will try as hard as you can to conserve that for yourself. So, you know, sometimes I think about if I'm on the road and there's road rage, before it'd be so easy to react and be like, well, screw you, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm like, what did you go through today? You know, like, who pissed you off? Like, I'll say it as a joke in my head, but it's also just a way of me telling myself, like, you don't know them. You're never going to see them again. Maybe what they did was wrong, but you're still okay. You're healthy. There's no accident. You're alive. Move on. Like, don't let them disturb your energy. Your energy is so valuable and sacred to yourself that the moment you give it to somebody else, you're really opening yourself up to harm, in my opinion, right? Energetically. Yeah. And like, Jay Shetty and Mel Robbins did a podcast. Oh, yeah. And it was like one of my favorite podcasts. Unreal. And Jay brings up this point where he's like, you know, Mel talks about let them. And, you know, if someone wants to walk out of your life, let them. Someone wants to be mad at you, let them. And there's 2 points that were brought up that I think were so, like, life-changing. One of them, Jay was like, if you're spending all your time and energy thinking about somebody that's left your life, did you wrong, so on and so forth, think about it like a currency. So imagine now every time you think about them, you have to give them $1. How many times are you going to think about them in a day? You're not, because if you're that mad at them, you're not going to want to go give them $100. And odds are they're probably not thinking about the situation that much. So you're straining yourself so much, putting energy towards someone that doesn't even treat you properly, you know? And then Mel Robbins said a point about, if someone's disappointed that you couldn't show up somewhere, that's amazing, because they actually care about you. Yeah. Like, think about it. If they weren't disappointed, you would be like, okay, did you even want me there? Yeah. And it blew my mind, because I'm like, I've never thought about that. I'm just more like, oh, of course you're disappointed. Of course you're mad. I'm sorry I can't come. Yeah. But now I'm like, wait, gratitude. I can't come. That can't change. But you care enough about me to have me there. And I think, you know, both of them have, obviously, they're on their healing journeys and have healed. But that comes from self-awareness. And you won't get to those points of having those realizations until you start to heal yourself and see how valuable you are as a human being, right?
Absolutely, right? And if you can't love yourself, you can't truly love another person, or show that love. Because if you're unable to show your self-love, like the person that you literally need to live with every single day, because nobody else is guaranteed for as long as, you know, your lifespan is.
It's true.
Then how are you going to show somebody else the love that they deserve? Yeah. Right. And that's why I think it's so important. We all have people in our lives. So whether, you know, you have a significant other or you have children, you're still somebody's daughter, son, aunt, maybe sister, right? So there's somebody in your life who looks up to you. There's somebody in your life who your decisions impact. Yeah. And so the more you are in your good energy space, and here's the thing too, like, it doesn't matter how much work you do with yourself, because I think that some people look at people who are holistic practitioners or who are life coaches or therapists or whatever the case may be, and they're like, oh, they've done the work, so like their life must be great. Yeah. People still have ups and downs. Yeah. Right? And it's okay to have bad days and cry and be emotional. It's what you do after that matters. Yeah. And that's the lesson that you get to share with people too, is like, I had a really shitty day. This is how I dealt with it, you know, and I'm so grateful that you're in my life. And I just thought I would share this with you so that, you know, like, you know, if you're ever feeling that way, you can come to me. Yeah. 'Cause it makes a huge difference. Right. And I think with my daughter, who is, you know, very in tune with her feelings, it's important for her to understand that it's okay to be emotional, and it's okay, you know, to allow yourself to naturally do what your body is telling you need to do. And she sees it from me too. Like, if I'm having a bad day before, I would never like sit down and rest and allow myself to be in the moment and allow myself to recover from it. And now I'm like, yeah, you know what, mommy's taking a break. I need a break. I need to like sit here and just like, maybe it's binge on a movie, or maybe it's read a book, whatever the case may be. But this is like my downtime. You're welcome to like come and sit with me while I do it. But I'm not, you know, up and doing the dishes and doing the laundry and all of that other stuff, because it's important to take me time and to allow your body to recover.
For sure. And I think it's because you value your you time and you've hit a place where you value your energy to not overwork it. That's how she's going to see it. That's how she's learning, right? Like, I think parents sometimes forget or underestimate the impact they have on their kids. It's like, you know, they look up to you and all that, but their kids are like sponges, and they look at everything you do, even the way you put a glass down, they're absorbing. So it's not just the major things that they're looking at. Like, every action will cause a reaction out of them, right? So I think for you, it's even just how you explain, no, I'm not just sitting on the couch. Like, this is why I'm doing it. And I think sometimes parents may think like, well, my child's too small to understand. And it's like, no, they're not. No. Even when they're small, even if they can't speak, just by you taking the time to explain something to them, already as they grow up, they're going to start to value different things based off of what you've explained. Not just, well, you can't do that. Okay, so now you've instilled a fear in me. I can't do that. Why can't I do that? Am I going to burn myself? Am I going to cut myself? Like, you know, can I not do that because of your anxiety and your fear, but there's actually nothing wrong with it? Like, there's so many realizations, right? And I think that's a big thing too, where parents will react based off their fears and anxieties. And it's like, how do you now differentiate that from what's actually good for your child and letting them do, even if you're like, oh my God, don't go on the table, but you're like, they'll be fine. They're going to learn something from that. How do you differentiate that? I'm actually curious.
So as you were saying it, I was thinking to myself, you know, obviously there's safety moments where you have to react immediately, right? Yeah. But I think the most important part is taking a step back before you react and saying, okay, I know this is what is about to come in my mouth, but why? Is this a me thing, or is this a them thing? Is this a safety thing? Like, question yourself. And then you can approach it in the best way that you possibly can, right? Because once again, as parents, depending on where you are in your life and your self-awareness and all of that, you only have the tools that you have
100%
in order to make those decisions, right? And so I think it's important to really stop yourself before reacting and ask yourself, why am I about to say what I'm about to say? And that's going to help you decide whether or not you're saying something because that's a fear that you have or because that's something that's actually going to be dangerous for them or something that's actually going to cause them harm. Because so often, like, anything simple like rollerblading, you know, we're like, oh no, that's dangerous, right? But did you ever break a bone when you did it? Did you ever? And breaking bones, honestly, it's a normal thing for kids. Like,
it's how they learn.
It is. It's how you learn. But if you're always so afraid to try something because of the what if, you're gonna miss out on so many opportunities in life, right? So it's important to not put our anxieties or our fears onto our kids so that they can grow to be like the best versions of themselves. And if you stop and if you have a good relationship with your kids where they feel safe and open to communicate freely with you, if you stop and listen to some of the questions they ask you, they're actually sometimes calling you out on things.
Okay.
So it's interesting to sit back and reflect on like, okay, you just asked me that, but the other day when this happened, this is correlated, right? And so like you said, they're sponges. So it may not come up in that moment, but it may come up and show up in a different way. And so it's interesting to stop and take a look at, you know, when your kids ask you questions or when they say certain things, and to ask yourself, did something recently happen that could be driving this question or that could be driving this response? And I think you'll find more times than not that it's actually their way of either reflecting on a situation that happened or trying to navigate how that situation could have been dealt with differently.
Interesting. I've never heard that before. That's very interesting. And kids ask a lot of questions. Like my brother, so like I was 9 when he was small. So as we're growing up, obviously now I'm hitting high school. He's in elementary school. So he's literally a child. I love him. He used to ask why about everything. Why is the CN Tower that tall? Why is the window foggy? Why are we driving it? I would go insane. And so would my parents. But it was like almost insane because I didn't know how to answer his question. And I saw myself as the older person and I should have the answers. So I wasn't mad he was asking the question. I was mad because I couldn't give him a proper response. But that was a realization I came to when I got older. In the moment, I was just like, he has so many questions, and like I'm a teenager at this point, so I'm like all fussy. Yeah. So I'm like, he has so many questions, whatever, and he's just a kid, and he just wants to know. And it's like, but through like I had my like spiritual awakening like later in university, so that's when I did all my healing and realization. Still, obviously on the journey, but I realized I'm like, so I said to my parents, I'm like, do you remember when Michael was small and he would ask why? Like, were you guys mad because he was asking why? Were you mad because you didn't know how to answer the question? And they sat there and they're like, oh my God, because we didn't know how to answer the question. And I'm like, this kid is so smart and he was really just trying to develop his brain. But as adults, we were getting agitated by something that was actually just a trigger for us internally. But in the moment, you don't realize it, right? And I think it's so important, like you said, before you react, whether it's like physically to like stop something or even just verbally. Why am I about to feel this way? Having those few seconds may even delay your reaction, because even if you're coming to the same conclusion you were going to get to, maybe the way you go about it isn't as jumpy or as antsy. Because like, you know, you see like a child falls. If you're like, oh my God, he fell, whatever, you pick him up. All of a sudden the kid starts crying because he's panicked. But if you go up to him, you're like, it's okay. Like, you're fine. You know, be that safety net. Now growing up, they also have that inner child feeling that they can trust you and you're not going to panic, you know? Because most of the times you panic, it's from your anxiety. So I think it's interesting to like hear you say that about like, you know, children and like your response, because I think a lot of people are even scared to come to that realization as parents, right?
Well, and I think like you said, so, you know, a lot of people will question, like, will say, you know, my child always asks me why. Like, they should just do it because I said so.
Right.
But I'm like, think about it. If as an adult, if somebody told you to do something and you were unsure about why you were being asked to do it, would you not ask why? Right? So sometimes you can approach the situation in two different ways. It could be like, can you please do this because? And already give them the answer to the why. And then they're not going to ask the why because they already know. Right? Or if, you know, you don't think about explaining yourself thoroughly and they ask why, just understand it's not because they're questioning you as their parent.
Right.
They're questioning why this is being asked of them, which is an important thing because you want them to question things in life. Because if you don't question things in life, then you don't learn. So don't take it personally as a parent. No, it would be my best advice.
No, it's true, 100%. And it's like, you know, if you grow up, like I said, there's like with me, there's differences between how my brother was raised and how I was raised. Like he asked a lot of why, but he got more of an explanation. When I would ask why growing up was just like, well, because I said so. Like, that's it. And I'd get so I remember as a child, I'd get so aggravated because I'm like, I just want to know, you know? But they like, my parents were just like, well, it's because we said so. We're the adults. You need to do this. And it's cool and it's great. And, you know, I read something the other day where it's like parents are doing the best they can with what they know, right? And we were talking about this. So it's like, I acknowledge that and they acknowledge that. And obviously what they knew growing up was way better. So for me, I was just like, okay, I'm going to take what they did, make sure they don't do the same thing with my brother. And now when he asks why, he has that explanation. So now just growing up in general, we just grew up very differently, you know, and it translates into adulthood and adult life. With me now, if I say like, you know, if someone says to me, why, now I'll be like, you know what, let me explain it to them. I would like not ask why for so long in my life because I'd feel like they're about to tell me, well, because I said so. So you carry that wound, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's definitely something that I think it's very important you mentioned. And then I guess just to kind of wrap this up, like last question for you. What's one piece of advice you'd give to your 16-year-old self?
I think this is such an important question, and I think this is an important question for everybody to ask themselves from time to time. And I think for me, the most important advice that I would give to my 16-year-old self is to understand that you don't need to decide your whole life in that moment. life is such a journey. You will have phases throughout your entire life. So whether it's, you're trying to decide what university to go to or college or what job you're going to get outside of high school, like understand that that's not a set in stone thing for the rest of your life. And you're allowed to change your mind, and you're allowed to change the decisions that you thought were, long-term goals or long-term decisions. So just know that you're not stuck. And that there's so many opportunities to learn and to grow and to change, that it's okay to change your mind.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that would be the biggest piece of advice to give myself, because I think, you're at 16 years old, people are starting to push, like, what are you going to do after high school?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh my God, I need to figure out like my whole career. And then, you go into university and you find a career, or go to college, whatever the case may be. And then you're like, do this career for a little bit, but you're like, oh man, I don't really like this anymore. But like, this is what I did. I went to school, I spent money. Like, I have to do this now.
Yeah.
But you don't, right? And as you grow and as you change, what you love and your passion and your purpose and your why changes.
Right.
And that's okay.
I agree. I literally agree with everything you just said. I think that's super important. Like, I know so many people that kind of changed career paths based on their studies and stuff. So that was amazing. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And everybody watching, hit her up if you have any questions about anything, she spoke about. I think your mental well-being, your mental wellness is very important. Angela's an amazing person, and she's always open to questions via social media. I'll tag all her accounts, put her website in all the descriptions, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, everywhere the podcast goes. And as usual, like I said at the beginning, like, subscribe, do your thing, and I'll catch you on the next episode.